Greetings, friends, and welcome to Beast Foundry. Today, we are continuing our dive into the many classes of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and Fighter is up. So, without further ado, Atalo, roll the intro. Now, for this class, this is probably regarded as the single most powerful class in Pathfinder. I don't agree with that at all. I think it is the easiest class to play. I think it has some of the most straightforward abilities, and thusly it gravitates to a lot of people. It is great for beginners. It is a fantastic class. It's most powerful? I know. You get really good attack. You can, you cause critical hits. We're going to go over all of that here in a little bit, but what it really does lack is a lot of versatility. You are pretty straightforward fighter, as you probably guess. You run up, you hit things. If you have enemies that, play a little into different dynamics of flying and you're not a range fighter, if the enemies are incorporeal, if they are resistant to your attacks, you can run into a lot of problems. So kind of important that you know how to play the fighter if you're going to be running into these things. So what does the fighter give you when you pick it? Well, you get 10 hit points per level. You are an expert in pretty much unarmed, simple, and martial weapons. You are trained in all armor. You're trained in unarmored. You are an expert in fortitude. You're an expert in reflex. You're trained in will. So that's kind of your weakness. You are even an expert in perception. The fighter starts as an expert in more things than any other class. And again, this is why this is a great beginner class. It is awesome for people that really, don't know what they're doing yet, that they have these advantages that they're harder to hit. They hit hard. They feel good because they're generally hitting with their attacks. Monsters have harder times hitting them, so phenomenal class for beginners. As you get into the fighter, you have to make some decisions. Are you going to be a two-handed weapon fighter? Are you going to be a two-weapon fighter? Are you going to be a range fighter? There are bows, there are crossbows, there are firearms. Arguably, bows are probably the best route with the fighter, so a ton of options. And then even in the two-handed weapon category, there are reach weapons versus the really heavy-hitting D12 weapons. Oh, and I totally forgot. The sword and board, your sword and shield fighter. Those are one of the best if you're tanking, because that shield adds so many more hit points to your character in a fight. So there are tons of feats for the fighter that really help you in whatever direction you are going. There are stances for the fighter. These are feats that when you enter them, they give you a special ability while you're in the stance. And then if you get knocked out of it, the stances are actually kind of hard for someone to end unless they knock you out. So there's some really great stuff with a fighter. So again, this is, hard to mess up. And this is, I think, why people really get onto this. This is the most powerful class. One of the biggest things you notice with the fighter, that if you have maxed out your strength, you have a +4 strength, 18 in it to start, you're actually going to have a +9 to hit at first level. The only other class that can achieve this is the gunslinger, and because they can be expert in firearms. So most everyone else caps out at 7, you cap out at 9, which means you have a much better chance of hitting, which also means you have a much better chance of getting critical hits. Fighter is all about weapon selection. You can go with your great big great axe, great sword, you're dealing a D12 big damage. You can go with your halberds and your glaives and all of the other reach weapons, spears, so you can capitalize as being the only class that starts with attack of opportunity, or reactive strike as it's being renamed in the remastered. You can capitalize on this so well. An enemy, if they run up to attack you, they have to move through a space that you threaten. And when an enemy exits a space you threaten, you get to make that attack of opportunity. So with a reach weapon, if an enemy doesn't have reach, you get to make attack of opportunity against them before they can even get to you. That's huge because that's at your full attack bonus. Again, you have that much higher chance to hit, much higher chance to crit. So yeah, fighters are where it's at if you really want to get in there and just tank and also wreak some serious havoc with the enemies. The ranged options, they're good because of that increased bonus to hit. Rangers, and gunslingers, they're truly designed around that. So it's really hard to say if the fighter's better or the ranger or gunslinger. I will absolutely say the fighter is a very solid option. They get plenty of feats to help them with range attacks. Do not count them out. They're just a different playstyle. You don't really, as a ranged combatant, attack of opportunity really isn't doing a lot for you, so you're not really utilizing the fighter to the best of its abilities if you go ranged, which is why I think people tend to gravitate more towards gunslinger or ranger, because their abilities completely gravitate towards those ranged weapons, and they're not losing anything by going that route. Probably one of the biggest advantages is they start with shield block. Awesome. And you might actually see, if you head to Reddit and check on some various threads and other discussion groups, there can be a lot of complaints about the shields in Pathfinder. A shield gives you an armor bonus when it's raised. You have to spend an action to raise your shield, and it stays raised until the beginning of your next turn. You get the bonus to your armor class, whatever the shield says. Different shields grant different bonuses. The biggest thing, though, is shields have hardness, and if you use the shield block reaction, they reduce the damage you took by that hardness. Whatever is left over gets applied to both your character and the shield. Shields have what is called a break threshold, and then they can also be destroyed. Every shield starts with a number of hit points. Like your large steel shield has 20 hit points. It has a hardness of 5, so whenever it gets hit, it reduces the damage by 5 when you use that shield block. Any damage left over gets applied to both you and your shield. The break threshold is always half of the destroyed total hit point value. The break threshold for a 20 hit point shield is 10. So once that shield takes 10 damage, it's no longer viable to use for a shield. Now, people complain about that, but you have to look at that. It's at least 5 extra hit points, because if, say, you got hit for 15, you would reduce by 5, and then the other 10 goes to the shield, so it's broken. But at low levels, an extra 5 hit points is huge, and they're probably not going to break the shield because you don't often get hit for that much damage. So you often can use it twice, which means that's 10 extra hit points. If it gets destroyed, okay, you do have to spend a little extra money to buy a shield. But if it just gets broken, you can repair it, which is really no different than healing your character with medicine and magic. And there is magic to basically fix your shield too. So you just kind of have to look at it. It is this hit point boost. And you can plan that if your shield's broken, you can switch your weapon up a little. If you take, say, a longsword does a d8 damage, and most one-hand weapons are going to deal a d8 at most. So if you pick like a bastard sword, it has a two-handed property, which means if you wield it in two hands, it increases the damage to d12. So if you're using the shield and you block until your shield hits its broken threshold or is destroyed, you can throw that shield down and now wield a two-handed weapon that's dealing d12. So there is a bit of versatility there that you're able to help tank. You can get in there, and you might want to even pick weaker enemies to go after first, using your shield to block any of their attacks and just pound away at them. I will say, shield block is a reaction. You only get one reaction. So if your attack of opportunity, you kind of have to decide, do I want to use my attack of opportunity or am I going to shield block? And every round is different. Some rounds, that attack of opportunity might not come up, and you're going to get a feel for that pretty quick. So you'll have a really good idea of if you should shield block or if you should do the attack of opportunity because you think it's going to happen. That just comes with a little bit of experience. And like I said, there are so many fun, cool feats for the fighter. I mean, right out the door, you could start with power attack. this is an awesome feat that lets you deal an extra weapon dice of damage. So if you're wielding that D12 damage weapon and you have power attack, it takes 2 actions to make this attack, but you get to add an extra D12. So if you hit, you're doing 2D12. At first level, that is monstrous. It is such a huge boost to your character. Now, if you think, oh, well, that takes 2 actions. I don't know. Personally, I really enjoy the fact that using those 2 actions, that hit is almost just as good as landing a second attack. Not quite, but the odds of landing that second attack vary with the enemy. So if you find their armor class is low and you think that second attack has a good chance, then go for it. Just 1 attack, 2 attack. However, if it's not that low, then you probably want to go power attack and then use that other action for whatever else you might want to do. And keep in mind, if the armor class is low and you're right next to that enemy, you absolutely can go 1 attack, power attack, thusly not getting that third attack penalty. So you're at that -10, you just stay at that -5, but if you hit, you're dealing an entire extra dice of damage. So super fun, super cool. As I said, fighters have a very good armor class, so you're incredibly durable in a fight. They have lots of hit points. They have, I can't stress enough how many fun feats that the fighter has. And whatever direction you want to take your fighter, there is so much support for you to do that. It's an amazing class, very well designed, and it really kind of has beginners in mind. It's easy to manage. There's not a lot of bookkeeping with it, no spells or crazy abilities, so super beginner friendly and a solid class. Again, this doesn't mean that it is invulnerable and it is the greatest class. If you're running an adventure that just has very straightforward enemies that you can get in there and just, swing away at, then yeah, the fighter's amazing. It's great. So is the barbarian. But once you start getting into enemies that have lots of tricks up their sleeves, the fighter starts to suffer a tiny bit. And if you don't have the proper spellcasting support for your fighter, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. Unless, you pour through the books, look for good equipment to help fill in those gaps. Can't recommend that enough. You should always be looking to accessorize. Who doesn't love accessorizing? Come on, it's amazing. And there are so many things you can do to help fill in the gaps for weaknesses and things like that you cannot go wrong. For the fighter, as I said, there's really not a ton to go over beyond what I've already told you. And as I said many times in these videos, I'm not here to tell you how to play a character. I'm telling you what the character does and to help you feel better about your choices and to make effective choices. Fighters have abilities, feats that allow them to frighten an enemy when they hit them. This is really good because as a fighter, you're probably not putting a lot into charisma. You have your strength that you most likely want. You have your con because you're going to want more hit points. You might need dex so you can help get your armor class as high as possible. So you might have some to put in charisma, but it's never going to be crazy high. So abilities that let you just add frighten with a hit or a critical hit are huge. And those abilities, that happens every time. When you go with intimidate, you only get to intimidate an enemy once, and then they're immune to it from you for 10 minutes, depending on the check. So for each enemy, you can only do it to them once per fight. So this is actually a better option. So just make sure you're looking through everything and that, you really look into it. Sometimes you look at things and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound interesting to me. But as you play, you get to a better understanding of how that +1 to hit, well, it's a -1 to the enemy's armor class, which is the same as a +1 to hit. Translates kind of in the same direction. That, again, you're hitting easier, you're getting crits easier. It makes such a huge difference. And I love characters that, can lead in with that intimidate and frighten the enemy and then make a really good attack. It has helped me out so many times. I cannot tell you the number of times I have hit or crit by 1. Phenomenal. So if you like this video, please give us a like, subscribe so you don't miss anything. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Coming up next, we have, what's after fighter? Gunslinger. Next is the Gunslinger, so pew pew fighter. This should be fun. So anyways, as always, game well, my friends.